How's it going, guys? This is Ev.
And this is Josh. We are the Real Estate Dudes.
That's right.
So today we're going to talk to you about something that we learned the hard way. So as part of this first project we're working on, we accidentally bought a condemned property. And so this video is to kind of explain what is condemnation, how do you get through it, what do you have to deal with through the process.
All right, guys. So let's start off by saying or explaining what condemnation actually means and what does it mean to be in condemned status, if you will. So it's usually deemed by the local jurisdiction of your city, of your state, and a few things that can add to what makes it a condemned property. Things like lack of sanitation is one of them, lack of running water, and utilities, of course, that could add to the property's condemnation status. General uncleanliness of the property. As you saw probably from some of our videos, you probably saw what the outside of our house looks like. So that can add to the whole factor of the city deciding to put a property under a condemnation hearing and kind of start the process there. And of course, things like use of drugs, prostitution, and other illegal activities will also can start that process. And of course, they'll start from a city's law enforcement agencies can start, working with the city and kind of get that property condemnation process started. And of course, there's other factors that can affect it: fires, flood damage, tornadoes, hurricane damage. All of that would, of course, make the structural integrity of the house lesser, or somewhat diminished, and it can not longer meet codes. It can also be unsafe to live in after those instances. And so inspections that deem structural damage for any of those reasons can start the condemnation process, and then it will take a while to kind of work yourself out of that situation. And of course, there's always an overriding eminent domain case that the city, state can start as part of a different condemnation process that, of course, for, let's say, building city roads, bridges, and developments like that can also start that separate eminent domain side of the process. So anyways, it's kind of the short and sweet version of what does a condemnation of a property mean.
Hey guys, so Ed went over what condemnation is, and I'm going to talk about what laws have to do with condemnation. So one of the very first ones that I'll go over here is that any owner of a property that has been condemned, they're allowed and entitled due process prior to the government taking action. So what that means is that they have to give you notice. You're allowed to challenge the ruling that the house is condemned. Fifth Amendment requires that the government only condemns a property for a public purpose. So the term public purpose isn't fully defined yet, but there are some guidelines around it. We don't want to give any kind of legal advice, so talk to your attorney first in case you do get served with a condemnation letter. But Ev kind of outlined some of the things that might fall into public purpose, like eminent domain. If they're expanding a road, you need to get rid of your house. Adequate notice has to be provided to you if your house has been deemed condemnable. That means you have to have adequate time, adequate information, and the opportunity to respond and challenge in case of condemnation. If the property has been condemned, the owner of the property may be entitled to compensation in alignment with the value of the property as seen by the government. That's not always guaranteed, though, depending on the state of the property. And an important thing to remember is that condemnations are always disputable, always challengeable. So make sure if you get a letter, get your attorney involved. You absolutely have a chance to challenge the ruling. So the next piece is we will kind of talk to you about our story, how we accidentally bought a condemned property, and all the things we had to go through to get to where we are now.
All right, guys. So let's talk about our story and how we got the property and how we found out about the condemnation status or summons. We got an email of a picture of a letter, and basically that letter came to the previous owners of the house that we purchased the house from, and the process has already been started for the condemnation, and it had the summons for condemnation hearing that we were supposed to show up to. Good news is that we actually had time to show up to the meeting, and they sent us the actual image of it. Otherwise, I don't think the city had it together to send us to our new address
Yeah, they didn't know that we had bought the property yet.
Yeah, they had no idea about that, which is, I guess we got lucky and unlucky at the same time. So, yeah, so that's kind of how it started.
Yeah. So one thing to mention here about condemnation and how we accidentally bought a condemned property. So as part of the closing process, when you buy a property, you've got a title company that does their due diligence. You're supposed to do your own due diligence, and there's another piece where the seller is supposed to disclose things. Really, all three of those pieces failed as part of this process, and that's how we ended up with a condemned property. So the seller was, like Ev said, he was well aware that the property had been condemned. He'd been showing up to these hearings, but he did not disclose it to the wholesaler that we went through. He didn't disclose it to us or the title company through the whole process. The city hadn't published the condemnation case in the public records yet, so when the title company was doing their due diligence, they didn't find it anywhere because it wasn't published anywhere.
It's right in between that process where it makes the history that gets recorded and the title company finds out about it. So,
and we didn't know to look for it, so we obviously didn't find it either. So
right.
Here we are with the condemned property.
And so I guess in this case, always be careful. I guess not be careful, but that's, I guess, getting a title insurance in this case is, in most cases when you buy a property, you get a title insurance. You purchase that as part of the buying of the property. And it's useful in this case, but at the same time, we didn't make a claim on that because, that's not the path we followed.
Yeah, we really had two options to move forward in this case. We could either, like Ev said, make a claim against the title insurance.
Yep.
We could try and sue the title company. We could try and sue the seller of the property for not disclosing. And then the other option was just to kind of work through it.
Yep. And in our case, we decided to work through it. Just because the complications of suing the title company or suing the previous owners, it can get pretty busy with where it can get expensive and it can take up a lot of your time going through the process, more of a headache. So in our case, we've always kept that as an option B. In case the quality or the cost of the renovation becomes so expensive that we can't do it, we always made sure that we kind of had that as a second option.
So the next thing that happened, so we got this letter. The very next thing we did was we called the city and we said, hey, we didn't know this house was condemned. What do we do? They just said, show up to the hearing as is stated in the letter that you got, or the picture of the letter that you got. And so we did that, and it was on a Monday, and like Ev said, we were able to go. That was quite a intimidating experience. Basically, there were two homes on the docket that day that had been condemned. Ours was one of them. Luckily, we got to watch the other house go first. And what I mean by go first is, so it's a hearing. There's a panel of people from the city, not all city workers, but they're seated in a big U-shaped table, and they call the house, and you have to go up there in front of them, and they start just drilling you with questions about what are you going to do with the property, why is it in such bad shape, how long do you need to fix it, how are you going to fix it, things like that.
Yeah, and the panel itself consists of, as you kind of alluded to it, there's some city workers, city inspectors, construction company or two, structural engineers, city inspection director was there, and a few others, smaller. I think there's some companies that are kind of on the board, trustees are on the board that
they're concerned citizens on the
sure.
board.
And so it's a bit intimidating to think about that, especially for us never being to meetings like that prior to this time. So
especially on our very first project.
Sure. Yeah, it was.
They threw a curve at us that we took it like we could.
Yeah, that's the best that we could do. And really, from our experience in going to that meeting, we've been to two so far, is that the people like us that actually want to renovate the project and get it done and fix it up and make it look nice is not their typical clientele, if you will. It's more of what you see a lot of more of is people with financial problems, health problems that can't afford to fix their house up, or let it just run into despair because they can't upkeep just structural or just the appearance of the property. Let's say there's a big hailstorm or tornado or something goes through, and the house, whether it's not insured properly or people can't afford to fix the roof, stays that way and then can just develop being really bad.
Since we were wanting to fix the property up, they were, I think, much more lenient with us. They granted a 2-month extension on the condemnation, and the time we had to repair the things that they required.
They did provide us with a list of things that they've identified that need to be addressed. And that's kind of what we worked with to decide whether we have enough of a budget to fix it, whether we can make some money in the property or break even, etc. Foundationally, outside, paint, roof and siding, things like that.
The main reason that this property was on the condemnation list in the first place was because the outside looked terrible. I'm sure y'all saw in some of the previous videos that the roof was in bad shape, the siding was in bad shape, the windows were in bad shape, the yard was in bad shape, and so they just wanted to make it look nicer.
The neighborhood, of course they're cared about the neighborhood, how your neighbors and just overall city looks to anyone living here. So, and from just a side story from the neighbors, who found out that not the previous owners, but the owners before then, were hoarders, and so there's lots of trash, garbage, things just piled up in the back. So it was actually in worse shape, and I think that's what started the condemnation process at that time. The previous owners, of course, didn't disclose that to us, and here we are. But we're making the best of it that we can.
Yeah, we went to the second condemnation hearing after the 2-month extension, and we had done a lot of work on the outside. And so, as part of that, they took the house off the condemnation list. So we're no longer condemned.
That's right. This is a good ending to the start of the video, where we cover a lot of the basics here. We don't give you any. Like Josh mentioned, this isn't to give you specific advice to what you should do, but just a general overview of how our story went and the things we've learned from it. So don't be scared, if condemnation is something you find out about that, because as we mentioned, they're more lenient towards people that actually want to make repairs, make the property look nicer, and make it habitable again. And so that was the case with us.
Yep. So I think just as some closing comments here, be careful purchasing condemned properties, intentionally or even on accident, because sometimes the repairs that are required to take it out of condemnation are very, very expensive. So you want to be sure that if you're an investor, that it makes financial sense before you buy a house like that. The repairs, any repairs that you have to do, they've got to be, they have to meet current code. They've got to be inspected by the city again. They've got to be done by licensed contractors. All these things that cause the cost to add up over time. We got lucky, and the actual repairs weren't anything more than we were initially planning on. But it could have got ugly real quick.
So just keep track of your budget. Make sure you understand your timelines. Make sure you built in enough of a buffer to where you can take any additional expenses. Engineering studies might sometimes be necessary. So yeah, that's kind of what happens in this case. Yep. So anyways, thanks for tuning in and kind of letting us explain the process. And of course, tune in for more videos, updates, and we'll have more content coming through.
Smash that like button.
Subscribe, like, and smash that like button.
We'll see you next time.
Later.